it really pains me to hear the lawyer jokes. It really pains me to hear political candidates make a big deal about, well, I'm not a lawyer. And it feels said that way, very snide. I remember a number of attorneys telling me that they don't like saying, I'm a lawyer when they go, say, to a party, because they know the first thing they're going to get is a dozen lawyer jokes. And I think the current attitude about lawyers has really invaded our public life. And I think lawyers fall for it. I used to be part of a community called the Pathwork, and they have a lecture there called The Shame of the Higher Self, about how easily we can get embarrassed about our best gifts, how we can be shy about our compassion, about our willingness to think reflectively and be quiet rather than be, oh, I'm so decisive. Or just how much we care about things. And I think lawyers have fallen into that really heavily. Some years ago, when I did a column on Judaism and what it's really given to spirituality and work, I thought about how much the whole Jewish traditions have given to law. I've written quite a bit on that, and just I'm always awed by it. And then someone told me about the ceremony of Simchat Torah, which I hope I've pronounced correctly. It comes after the cycle of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And it's the time of the year when the whole Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, they've been unwound. They've read all the way through the Torah. And so they have the ceremony of rolling it back to the beginning. And there's a moment, I've been told, when someone holds up the Torah and says, thank you, God, for the laws which hold us together. Thank you. It's that binding. I remember Steve Kiva talking about, I can't remember the name of the person who said that law is like the tissue. It helps hold the tissue of our society together. And I know I'm not quoting it right, but this holds us together. And I started crying when I first heard of that, and I said, we are so overdue for a ceremony of celebrating human law. And so the first time I thought about it and told someone about it, I said, wouldn't it be fun to just really have a ceremony where someone dances down the U.S. Constitution? And people go, wow, thanks God and everyone who helped create it and whatever mysteries helped create it. Thanks for this Constitution that really created a foundation that has been sent around the world. And oh my gosh, it's been eroding. Isn't it time to shore it up? Isn't it time to, what's the word here in California? Retrofit and clean it up and re-anchor it and just dance it down the aisles and the Bill of Rights and other things. And then someone says, well, what about the Code of Civil Procedure? And I think that person meant it as a joke, and then I went, yeah. Because the codes of civil procedure are about the everyday workings of things. And you think about people like the prisoners in Guantanamo Bay, wouldn't they love to have a really good code of civil procedure that was honored? So this is the way I see it, that we honor in this country all the things that helped us develop the foundations for law, an agreed upon law, and all the ways that laws are made. And that means you honor lawyers. And I think it's not just giving lawyers the overdue respect, but it's also respecting what we can get from law. It's saying we really respect a community that's bound together by this. Imperfect as law is, it's the best shot I've ever seen. It's way far better than let's fight each other out. And it's immensely bigger than this, well, let's decide things on the basis of popularity or beauty contest or American Idol contest. Let's base this on integrity and thought and carefulness. Because, at the heart of it, law is about being careful. Law is about taking due diligence. I love that term. Due diligence means you and I are due carefulness to each other in whatever we do. I think that's just the most amazing, spiritual, solid human concept. And I think that's also one of the reasons people don't like law, because people have ideas, things they don't want to deal with. They want to go in the rosy glasses type thing. Let's create this thing, Kim, you and I. Let's just do something. And let's not really think about what could go wrong, because, oh, that might make everything go wrong. Or let's not take the time to think it through clearly. And law says, let's do. Let's take the time to think through very clearly. And I think if we started honoring that and honoring lawyers, one really big thing would happen is we get better law and better lawyers. The field of psychology is so loaded with so much research that when you honor someone, you acknowledge the other, that you invoke and pull out the best in them. When you dishonor them, you get the worst. When John got that job to do the research direction of that Spirituality and Work Resource Guide, it connected me with the Organizational Development Network in the Bay Area. They had a meeting about a year or so before and defined spirit and work as one of the issues they really wanted to deal with. At that time, the whole OD, organizational development, and the training fields had been working for several years with the whole concept of change management, and had come up with the idea that there was no way you could deal with major change in any organization without dealing with more than just the body and the mind people brought to work, that you had to deal with spirituality. They had discovered that there were so many ways you could deal with spirit and work, and the question was, how could you do it in a really great way? So I was invited to join the group to plan for this series of meetings they were going to do, even though I was not yet an OD consultant. So I joined in them, and at one of the meetings, someone was saying, well, how can our meetings be really honoring of spirit and work, and how can they build it, how can the meetings themselves reflect it and honor it and represent it? And I immediately just blurted out, well, we got to have an altar. People always do in workplaces. And someone said, what do you mean? And it was one of those moments where you blurt something out, and then you start thinking about what you've said, and you start thinking about it. And I realized that since I had first started working for lawyers and other places in the 70s in Washington, D.C., in that attempt to avoid a real job, I had noticed that if I was sitting at the desk of someone who was returning, there was almost always something in the desk drawer that spoke to that person. I found a lot of Bibles. I found a few Bhagavad Gitas. I didn't see a Quran at that time. A lot of poetry, a lot of inspirational quotes. And that said to me, these people have a rich spiritual life that's, private. In one of my early jobs, actually before I started working for lawyers, I was temping at a large commercial real estate firm in Washington, D.C. And it felt like going into enemy territory. I had come out of some of the furthest out human potential stuff in the 70s and just had to pay the rent. So I had walked out that morning armored with the Tao of Physics, and I held it kind of like this, which was then fairly new. And so people would politely ask, what are you reading? And I would say the Tao of Physics, it's about blood. And they would almost always cut me off with, that's nice. And I thought, well, nobody really thought much of it, and I'm really out of place here. Within a day or two, though, people started having conversations with me. First one, somebody in the office came up and said, I want to talk to you about something, but you've got to promise not to tell anybody because they wouldn't understand. Okay. And that person told me about his or her spiritual practices and how it related to their work and what they would really rather be doing. By the time I finished that assignment, I think it was about 2 weeks, every person in that office except two, one high executive and one staff person, had gotten me either off-site or behind closed doors to talk about spirituality.